My name is Sarah Ripp. I'm the Assistant Director for the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies Program. I'm pleased to see all the people here today, especially some students. Before I introduce our speaker, we have someone from Chicano Latino Studies that wants to make an announcement about some other programming that might be of interest to some of you since you're interested in this talk today.
Yeah, video too, the forthcoming. Thanks a lot, and I'm great to see such a big turnout for this event. My name is Pete Haney. I'm the administrator for the Chicano Latino Studies Program with the upstairs. I can also say that I was at UT Austin some time ago in grad school, so I remember Dr. Subervi from there. It's great to see him. I don't think we really crossed paths that much, but wonderful to see a familiar face. If you're interested in today's talk, you'll love our panel next Wednesday at 5 in this room. The first of two panels on Puerto Rican studies in the Midwest. This one is focusing on Puerto Rican communities in Chicago. So we will have a presentation by Mirelsi Velázquez from University of Illinois or Champaign, Sara Awatani from University of Michigan, and Mauda College-Moore from Illinois State. So the focus on the Midwest, Sara Awatani actually looked at some parallels between Puerto Rican situation and the situation with Palestinians. So very interesting. Anyway, so I just hope that if to let you know that this is happening Wednesday 5 in this room, and there will also be a meet and greet upstairs in 340 at 2:30 with some of the panelists. So if you want to engage in an informal chat with them, it's another opportunity. Thanks very much for allowing me to make that announcement.
Yeah, and I think I have the flyer for the event. We're one of the co-sponsors on our bulletin board out there. Okay, so before I do my official introduction, I have to ask you all to please make sure you have your audio turned off on any laptops or phones, etc. Also, gang, what else do I have to ask people? Oh, yes. And also there is a very, very, very sensitive microphone up here. So it picks up like the tiniest little whisper. So people on Zoom will hear everything. So yeah, everything. So
we're not exaggerating. We've tested it.
Yeah. So just thought I'd mention that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Professor Federico Subervi, who is a honorary fellow for the Latin American Studies Program. And so we're really excited that he's here today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about him before he gets started. He is originally from Puerto Rico. He's continued numerous research, publishing, teaching and mentoring in community service endeavors. He's held academic posts at the University of California, Santa Barbara, UT Austin, Texas State University, Kent State University, and was also a visiting professor at the University of Leeds in the UK. He has been a Fulbright scholar in both Brazil and Chile, and was a visiting professor or lecturer at universities, in various countries, including Puerto Rico, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Germany, Spain, and Russia. He is the editor and co-editor of 3 books, numerous journal articles, book chapters, reports, and he currently serves as the co-editor-in-chief of the Oxford Encyclopedia of Communication, Race, and Ethnicity. During his time as a fellow for our program, he has continued conducting his research, publishing and engaging in community service. His most recent research was a study of risk and health communication in Puerto Rico and Florida, a project that was administered by the Natural Hazards Center with funds from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which I believe is what we're going to be talking about today. From his home in Austin, Texas, he is editing his next book, which is an anthology on political communication in Puerto Rico, and is also working with the organization Boricua Media, did I say that right? Boricua, to provide news and information options for the Puerto Rican population in Florida. Based on, I can't see that, his lifelong work on diversity research and teaching. In 2012, the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Comm honored him with the Lionel L. Barrow Jr. Award for Distinguished Achievement in Diversity Research and Education. And And in 2017, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists also recognized his teaching, research, and community service by inducting him into the organization's Hall of Fame. So please join me in welcoming him today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you all for being here. Anybody? Hey. Great. That's good. Screen over here. Trying to log me into the UT net. That's
Okay.
fine. No problem. No problem. That's what's important. I want to start with appreciation, special thanks, because I was a graduate here many years ago, and I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm going to start with the most recent one that I'm here today, thanks to the support of people show here that have made it possible to visit here in a couple of days. Hanging around good old Madison, which my wife is here, Julia, my wife and I love, and the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, which provided me, along with other departments and universities and the Writing Center, with the skills that allowed me to have a very successful 30+ years of professional work, teaching, education, and all of these things. And it's really thanks to that education that I have not only finished my work, because I'm retired, but it's salary only. And I say that repeatedly because I may have retired from, my official retirement was from Kent. And then after that, I was at Leeds. And then I also taught two courses in Puerto Rico last year, another one in Chile this summer, and then the previous one. And you'll see all the other work that has been going on. But it's thanks to the education that I got at Wisconsin. We'll get emotional about saying that because of how great it was. It was hard. You know it's hard because of the demands, but it was great. So 3 topics today about the media system in Puerto Rico, the health of communication research that was possible thanks to support that I got here. And these are the ones, and political communication. These are the works that I'm going to focus on, not on all the past work, but on what I've been doing since I became Honorary Associate Fellow, which is, how many years ago? 3, 4, 5 years ago? Not that much. And why I say this is because once you retire, I've been in academia, I was affiliated, I had an appointment with some university for 30-something years, California, New York, whatever it was, and I had access to libraries, I had access to students. I could go in and log on and get all of that. Now I retired, but I don't have that. Well, I didn't have it briefly. And then when I got this honorary post, I could go to the Wisconsin Library, download anything, get copies. And when I need help with my computer, I just call the help desk here, and within 5 minutes, they solve whatever problem I have. How great of a support can that be? I haven't had a penny from this associate position, but it doesn't matter because I've gained so much. And the biggest help, and I'll be mentioning in advance of the risk health communication, was when even after I had finished all of these other projects that I was working on, in end of October last year, September. My wife and I were in Puerto Rico when Hurricane Fiona hit, and I had received a call for proposals from the Natural Hazards Center, and I had ignored it. Oh, I don't want to do more research and whatnot. And the long story short is that we submitted a grant, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But it was thanks to Alberto Vargas, through which I got the IRB approval within a month that I would never have got if I would not have been associated with Wisconsin. And if I would have tried to get that in Puerto Rico, I'd still be waiting for the approval from any university there. And it's not the bad talk about Puerto Rico, it's just that universities, including that one, don't have the IRB system as well as this one does. So if you have to do any research, count on them, and you're nodding because you know how good and how things are. Okay, So here's the story. That was my book when I came here in October 24th, 2019. But it hadn't been published, it hadn't been printed. So I talked about it at the Chicano Center with the lunch with the students, and I may have talked about it at the School of Journalism as well. I don't remember if I had talked there. That was prior to the book. But that's a book, and it's the first book ever to talk about the political economy of the media system at Puerto Rico. That's what I came to Wisconsin to do. When I was admitted at Wisconsin, I want to be a person who does the political economy of the media systems of Latin America, focusing on Puerto Rico. But the fate had it that I couldn't do the research on Puerto Rico because there was no money, no support. I didn't have all of what was needed. And I helped another doctoral student with his data cleaning and analysis for library studies that had research about Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans in Chicago. And he did his dissertation on library use and studies and information use. And then Salazar did his, who's collaborated with on political participation in Chicago, but neither one of them put the two together to look at political communication and Latinos, all three of these groups that I coached. And that was my dissertation. And I was able to graduate. It took me a long time, but I graduated. And I learned how to write thanks to the Writing Center people who guided me on how to take those early essays that I wrote with my Puerto Rican style, with those long sentences. Like if I were Gabriel Garcia Marquez, never thought of that I could be like that, but it's just my idea of writing with those long sentences without a period and a comma or anything else, and then put them into what is the US style of writing for academia. And that has carried with me so long. And I have taken it forward to many other students in all of these years. And one of the things that I was able to do this in a cohesive way, because once I retired, I started focusing. I stopped working on Puerto Rico, on Latino issues, and I started focusing on Puerto Rico and looking in 2019. And it was very political economy and the legal system of Puerto Rico. I'll tell you some of the highlights in a moment. So the moment it was finished, I started working on the translation and updating it, because from 2018 that it was, we finished gathering the data, to August 14, 2022, a lot had happened. So this has not an appendix, it's another 100 pages of an epilogue that covers up to the arrest of Wanda Vasquez, the interim governor, and then also something you may have heard of, the most well-heard and seen concert of Bad Bunny. Because it was in so many media. So we covered up to that, that was it. Now I'm already gathering for the, I'm not sure I'll do the next book, but maybe a couple of years from now. What is it about the media here? Well, one thing, oh, here's a little sideline. I just learned that the book, the Spanish language, was considered for an award. It is already an award. We don't know if it's first, second, or third prize or whatever, but it's for the Latino Book Award. So one of the 14 things about this book, well, we all know Puerto Rico's media is determined by the colonial structure, which it's part of. There are many factors: the US Constitution, the fact that the media are owned by, at least with the broadcast media, television are owned by US corporations. There's no local ownership in terms of major entrepreneurs anymore. That own the television system. Radio stations are changing and more external ownership. 1/3 of the radio stations, AM or FM in Puerto Rico, are religious-based. Many of those foreign to Puerto Rico, well, external to Puerto Rico, and then all of the content is, praise the Lord, like the lady next door to the room where we stayed. With my wife and I was invited to give a talk at the University of Texas in Arlington. That was Wednesday. And then Friday night, the lady in the room next door thought that God was deaf. So we prayed really loud until 12 at night, and then starting at 5 a.m. And she really I believe that either she was so emotional about it, or she thinks that God is deaf, because you could hear her in our room and then across the hall. Anyway, why did I get into that? I don't know. But the thing is that it is a colonial situation in which the radio stations in Puerto Rico are owned by these religious groups that contribute to the bottom line here is the status quo. Because when we hear about what goes on in many countries around the world, about there's a revolution, there's something that's really unjust, and now there's a revolution. And I had a colleague of mine in Puerto Rico, Jaime Luch. Some of you may have heard of him. He's a really prominent scholar in comparative politics. He says, ¿por qué no hay revolución en Puerto Rico con tanta corrupción? Why isn't there a revolution in Puerto Rico? I said, Jaime, look at the media system in Puerto Rico. Understand the media system, and then the process is one of status quo. So that's what the book talks about in many ways. It also points out the changes that came after Hurricane Maria that transformed the media, all of the firings, the closures, and all of these changes that came about, of course, in society as well, the culture, many other things. But this book, which was developed while I was at the University of Leeds, I had started it many years ago because for a couple of years, I went to Puerto Rico and read almost every single thesis that had been written at the University of Puerto Rico School of Communication. And I started reading and have an Excel document that has so many documents, so many notes about the articles about Puerto Rico. So when I was at Leeds, I developed the work. And as I'm about to finish the book, I don't my co-author, says, Federico, why don't you go to Puerto Rico and interview some journalists? And see if you give us an update. I said, muerto quieres misa. Really? Do I have to go to Puerto Rico? Should I go to Puerto Rico? Yes, I went to Puerto Rico. I was delighted to interview some journalists, and 60 of 120 responded. And from there we have chapters 5 and 6. That was a good sample, right? Good response rate. You remember that? Cool. So they talk about their situation as journalists, about the future of the media, the crisis that they're going through, and one of the key issues is the lack of transparency of the media governance in Puerto Rico. So we have that 2 chapters on that. One of them is on journalism education. So we have the first essays about the history of journalism education in Puerto Rico, that as well. Now, one of the questions that I asked journalists after they talk about the problems that they have and all of the things that are going on in the media is, would media literacy help? And 59 of the 60 said yes. Some of them with essays, meaning long paragraphs to a short answer, yes or no. And it was wonderful to read that. And even more so because last night, are you aware of the Capital Times events that are going on this week here? Okay, so last night as we were walking around, I picked up the Capital Times, and there's this announcement about a talk about artificial intelligence and journalism and artificial intelligence. And my wife and I just went, oh, let's go there. And we did. And one of the things that they talked about, at least a couple of the journalism, and a couple of other people, and they talked about the imperative of media literacy, especially for using the AI in the creation of content. That we might not even know that it's artificially created, and they can use your name, your voice, to say that all students in liberal arts are now going to get free tuition. I just made that up, of course. But someone can take your voice, your image, and present that, and before you know it, you're going to be in trouble as trying to persuade that that's not true. Now, that's just a silly example. Imagine what's going to happen with the elections next year. So anyway, media literacy is imperative for dealing with that and for understanding what's going on in Puerto Rico to overcome the challenges of corruption and so many other things. Okay, let me where we go back to my having been in Puerto Rico, preparing the last bits for the presentation of the book in Spanish. When Hurricane Fiona came about, and we had fortunately gone to Libreria Laberinto the day before, and I had about 6 books. I read 4 of them in those 2 days. Just couldn't go out. But I realized that the problem of communicating the issues of the hurricane were the same as with Maria and many other things. So when I got back to Austin, I pulled out the proposal from the Natural Hazard Center and started writing a proposal to get funding to do an assessment of the decision makers in government and the decision makers in media on informing the public about the problems of the hurricane. And for that, I recruited 2 wonderful people, Sandra Fabregas Troche, who I had worked on a presentation and went to a conference on bioethics in Puerto Rico, and Mirelsa Modesti, who was the one person who had done a study of how students and their families reacted and communicated or didn't after Hurricane Maria. So I talked to Sandra, she said, bring along Mirelsa, and then both of them, no, Sandra said, well, how about if we bring along Gary Krebs? Gary Krebs, if you don't know his name, it's because you don't study health communication. And if you do study health communication, you have to know his name because he is the guru, the #1 person about health, who has done research about health communication in the United States and many other parts of the world. He has over 600 citations. Oh, wow. When he sent me his CV, which I had to send for the proposal, I was, what? Page after page of co-authorship. So, and then he brought in one of his students from Peru, by the way, who is now a professor. She's not a professor, she's a researcher in the Washington, D.C. area. So we made the team, we got a $50,000 proposal to study communication with the decision makers in Puerto Rico in the media and the decision makers in the government offices that deal with this type of topic. And again, I cannot under stress, I have to say, so fantastic that when we had to submit the IRB application for getting the fund, because we weren't going to get a penny until we had that letter signed within a month. Some fantastic people here at Wisconsin, because of my affiliation. Of course, Professor Vargas is the main PI. He's the one who shows up, but I was born, and he made it possible, and we got the funding. And we did the study, and I have a link for you, and I'll tell you a couple of the highlights. Here's the link. I mean, it's all, you can go to the Hazards Colorado EDU, and you'll find that hyperlink to the whole report, which we finished and we presented. We submitted it July 31st, and then on August 19th, except for Patricia, who was in Peru, the whole team went to Puerto Rico, and we had a forum on this with top officials in Puerto Rico and some few media people now. If you ever have to study media decision makers or even journalists, they're hard not to crack to respond to surveys. We got a few, but not as many as we'd like. And in Florida, and we got a few in Puerto Rico, thanks to Mirelsa Modesti. If you know Mirelsa Modesti, if you've been in Puerto Rico, there was this, La Criada Belda Gonzalez. If she was on a TV, you would remember her. I remember her from, she was a comedian. And she was the most known and well-loved comedian. And then she also became a senator in Puerto Rico. And her daughter is Mirelsa's connections. We got some media people to respond and a whole bunch of other connections. We got this study. And what did we find? Now, I'll just give you a couple of highlights because I don't want to take too much time. I want to allow for some other interaction with you. There's a lot to be done to improve how people are informed about health and risk communication in many other parts of the world, but certainly in Puerto Rico, where politics comes in again as the governor will appoint, whoever's in power will appoint his folks depending sometimes, many times, on how much they contribute to his party. Not necessarily the most capable people to be the informers of risk and health. There are lots of great folks, but sometimes, and even more so at the municipal level, at los municipios, at the city hall, it's the mayor who says, how much did you contribute? Oh, do you know someone? Come over here. Not necessarily the most capable people to provide risk and health communication. So we documented that, we present our report, we have our recommendations. And one of the recommendations on the meteorological side is that hurricanes are, the hurricane advisories are category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've heard that, right? Okay, but that's just the wind. Where's the category for how much rain? There are none. So we have recommended to these folks to have a category for rain, not just wind, because, oh, this Fiona is, oh, it's only a category 2 or 3, but it was probably a category 10 in my point of view, of course. A category 10 in terms of rain in many of the towns. It wiped out so much. So these are the things that we documented with this research. And when I get back to Austin on Friday, maybe tonight I have to start working on that. We're going to put a follow-up proposal to do the research at the municipal level. Anybody interested? Let me know. Because we will need some assistance somewhere down the line if we get the funding for that as well. Now, in this process with the municipalities, it is crucial that the mayor selects someone to provide this. There's multiple layers of communication and they don't always work together. From the central government, and then we have the FEMA and all of those, and there's crisscrossing of information, of sources, of what to do. Oh yes, take shelter. Oh no, it's not so bad. Or yes, this is, and it's not just where to take shelter, it's where to go afterwards for the recovery for different things, long-term, short-term. So that research has not been done because in Puerto Rico, the School of Communication from which I was the first graduate at the master's level, one of two, we graduated at the same time, never developed research as their primary goal for teaching and other things. So when this individual who became director many years ago, he's no longer there, gracias a Dios, okay. But it was too late because he had turned the school into, instead of a school of journalism and mass communication, into a center for studying rhetoric and postmodernism. Great, but where's the research? So there's nobody in Puerto Rico doing social science communication research, not even in health communication research, and there's a big need for that. And that's why, along with Miderza and Sandra, we are planning on putting a Center for Bioethics Communication Research, if we get the funding for that from the CDC. So that's part of the process as we move along. Now, not satisfied with that, see, that's why I love my retirement, because I was doing it without having to attend faculty meetings. But I still advise students. I was advisor for a student in Barcelona, another one somewhere else, and another one in Madrid. I love that. That I do. So I've been able to do that. And then along the way, I had colleagues who, with Mia Moody, me, Heiko Shagan, and Emily Guajardo, we just got in August the top faculty paper for AEJMC's Minorities in Communication Division, in which we did an analysis. This is something we've been doing now for 2 or 3 years, of the AEJMC's, the Association for Education and Journalism and Mass Communication leadership. And guess which is the biggest gap in the leadership? One word, I'll just use the Latinas or Latinas. White women have progressed, they're overrepresented. Asian American faculty are way overrepresented, but the association hasn't done enough for the Latino and a good chunk of the Native American population. So that's our research, very well documented for what we did. And we got the top award this year. That's just to keep me busy. And these are She was the chair of the division. This is Emily Guajardo, the doctoral student, Mia Moody and myself celebrating as we got the award. Hegel Shagan couldn't go in from Detroit. So, not satisfied with that, I said, I'm gonna do what I came to Wisconsin to do and what I always wanted to do as well in Puerto Rico and do political communication. Why? Because when I was a graduate student in Puerto Rico, not even a graduate student, when I went to as an undergraduate to the University of Puerto Rico, I wanted to do aeronautical engineering. Yeah. But I was not in the right university for that, but I was in the right university to realize the contradictions of a colonial system with what happens in front of you when there are protests versus what is told in the news. And I saw that contradiction. I started saying why. And that's how I got interested in communication. And I was looking for books on political communication in Puerto Rico. There are not, well, there are essays and there are books that deal with, but not what it was. So if that was also what I wanted to do when I came here, couldn't do it. But it didn't stop me from doing it now, in addition to the other one. And just on Tuesday, the 12th of September, I sent to the publisher, the same publisher of my other book in Spanish, Ediciones Edil, all the manuscripts for this book that now has these chapters. I'm not sure if you could read them, but it has the foundations, a holistic view, thesis. Oh, this one, I'll tell you about it in a moment. This is part one. I'll show you the titles of the 15 chapters. But I wanted to show this segment because with this holistic view, what I did was put into writing this that I developed when I was in Wisconsin in a broader way. This is a simplified way, which the exo-national entities deal with the structure of the media system, the content, and the audiences and whatnot. And yeah, I did that when I was a graduate student here. I never put it in writing. And finally, I did put it in writing in chapter 2. And then for the chapter 3, I took a look at all the writings that I could find about political communication in Puerto Rico and categorized them using that schema that I just showed. And then the thesis, and then a whole bunch of things. And then the other people were contributors. Those are the chapters in Spanish. That's the foundation. These are the other chapters. Wilda Rodriguez, a very well-known journalist in Puerto Rico. She has her chapter. Another chapter on radio. This one's on radio. This is on the movies. These are the historical chapters. And these are the contemporary ones of the protest to get rid of the governor, how the youth movement, how the media was used in that movement. This one is an analysis of the governor's tweets. Not as critical as I would have liked it to be, but it's there as a methodology example. And then this study by Yarina here, who got her PhD at Michigan State on the radio stations. And then we have Sandra Rodriguez Cotto, my co-author in the other book, do an assessment of the trolls. And if you read that chapter or read what she's gone through and what she's documented about the trolls, you'll be amazed. And that's that chapter. And this then Jaime Torres takes the local community municipal connections, the symbiosis between the local folks, local government and media, the local media. And then my co-editor for the book has a whole essay on the politic of a new constitution and how it should be developed. The last chapter is my own on synthesis of the book and then recommendations for future research. If anyone is interested in political communication and research, I don't have to be employed by any university to help guide you along the way because there's so much to be done. And then the references are the books on political communication, the theses and dissertations, and then other references for the rest of the book. And then what's next? I'm wrapping up. Well, with my co-researcher, Sandra Fabregas, we have funds from the Red Cross to train the trainers on health and risk communication. We start that next month. Okay. We have another application from the National Hazard Center, another one from the Centers for Disease Control. We've been asked to work on a book chapter from our previous research for the natural hazard related book. And other projects, I don't know. The other projects are to travel. In October, my wife and I will be going to Ecuador for the Federación Latinoamericana de Facultades de Comunicación, where I'll be giving a couple of talks and visiting Ecuador, maybe Galapagos, we hope. And yeah, no, she's looking at me, not maybe, yes, we are gonna go to Galapagos. Not maybe, I just we hope to get the tour set up. And any other projects that I get invited to that my time allows, I will gladly be at your service from wherever I am. Thank you very much for your time. With me, do that email and questions, comments, I'm open for that. Is that timing is okay?
Oh, yeah, you're fine. You have till 1, even though the clock is,
Yeah, it's a
the
couple of
minutes
hours.
are correct, the hours are wrong. So
Okay,
we've got
so-
plenty of time for questions, and also, Federico, I will manage the chat here, so if anybody has a question through there, I
Through
can
chat,
let you know
welcome
too.
to
Yeah.
Okay. Comments, questions, please.
I was really interested by the commentary on how the news covers hurricanes. And I guess it's a common frustration, not just from people from Puerto Rico, but also from the Caribbean, about how hurricanes are covered for the US news or even international news. I guess how does the coverage in Puerto Rico differ from what's being covered in the United States regarding storms? And I guess I just want more insight into what it looks like.
I haven't done the comparative analysis, content analysis. But there's one common theme that we learned along the way. And it was pointed out by a number of people we interviewed. It's very alarmist and not an informative view. So the alarmist is a norm, not an exception. And it may be true where the hurricane is about to hit anywhere in the US, it's gonna be alarming. But one of the reasons that we heard along the way about why it's alarmist is because people will react to the emotion of fear more than to the news. These are the things that you should do to safeguard yourself. Tell people these are the safeguards, these are the things, blah, blah, blah. And if someone over here saying, run for your life, people will run for their life rather quickly than just, oh, what are the steps that I have to take? Still, there's more research to be done with here's another, one of the biggest problems is the lack of training for the journalists who deal with this. In the US, there are many schools, including Wisconsin, that have science and health communication for journalists. Not that I know of, there is no such course on science or health and risk communication in any of the journalism programs in Puerto Rico. I may be wrong, I haven't studied each and one of the curriculum of all of the schools. The Catholic University in Ponce is considering having what might be the first undergraduate specialty in health and risk communication. That's another thing that I didn't want to put on here, but we are in conversations with the president and other people to help them engage in that and have a certificate of health risk communication with my colleagues, Sandra and Mirza. That was an outcome of this work. And we're already connecting to do that with a university in the Dominican Republic. And all of these things are in the works because there is a recognition, there's a realizing of how little there is in the training for that. So the training has to be from the media part, but here's another thing that I didn't mention. The undermining of the official story of what to do is going through social media. Undermining because someone will say, how about if you take this hydrogen peroxide and you drink that and you'll be cured of the COVID. And it spreads like wildfire, before someone can counter that. So the lady who has a white coat and pretends to be a doctor says that if you take a vaccine, you'll be injecting the devil. And she's saying it with a white coat. Now everybody is spreading that, and when it got to Miresa, she found out who this lady was, and she's a disgruntled, desprestigiada pastor of a church that doesn't have any following, she doesn't have any degree, but she had social media and the spreading of that false information. So another part, and we go back to the part of the media literacy, is getting news and media literacy from grade 1 onward, and getting the training for the journalists who will cut that. And if our bioethics center comes through, we would be a clearinghouse for those misinformation and all of that before it's, well, as it spreads, but will people say, oh, is that really true? We'll have a place where we'll have people to assess if that happens, if we get the funding. So it's a long answer to the comparison, but the bottom line is that there's not enough education training for the journalists in Puerto Rico, and then the outcome is vente tú, if you know Spanish, you know what I'm saying. Oh, come on, you're my friend, come over here. You don't have to be politics, but vente tú, you come over here and you do that. But not necessarily, I know that you have the credentials to do that, so now I'm gonna hire you to do it. The association, the Puerto Rican Journalists Association, is having workshops to overcome some of that, but they're far from having accomplished. Yes?
I have a question. So as just, all of us being consumers of media in various ways, like, it sounds like these programs that maybe are in development would train journalists and those producing and providing media, but I'm curious, like, if there are tools that you could even recommend now that could help just the average person be able to identify what is trustworthy and what isn't, and if that's like rolled into these programs that you have in development, because I mean it is terrifying that you just, like what you mentioned in the beginning, that with the AI, the way that people's voices and there's all these fake videos and yeah, so I'm just sort of curious about that.
For the class that I teach in Chile, vulnerable democracies, fake news and propaganda. It's a graduate course for some students. I taught it by Zoom. Had they been able to enroll 7 students, I would have gone there. We would have gone there to teach it in person, but there was a limited enrollment. But and then they paid me the same, which was more than what Calle, the University of Puerto Rico and Calle, twice of what the University of Puerto Rico and Calle paid me for double the students. But I have a whole list of sources. I can pull up, I don't have it, I have it on my computer somewhere, for challenging fake news, and they have the Chipiando and the Spaniard group and a number of these have fact-checking sources. And if you're in journalism or anywhere in communication, you should get a class in which you find these. I don't have them at the top of my head, but there are there for fact-checking. Now, since none of us have the time to check everything that we do, last night, Kathleen, the chair of journalism, said one piece of advice that I will pass on to you. It was one of the people who talked last night said, if it touches your emotions, if anything you receive provokes your emotions, stop. Because the artificial intelligence from Twitter, tweets, and all of these things are prepared and done exclusively to provoke your emotions so that you'll stay longer and pass it on. So the moment you see something, even if you agree with it, that it touches your emotion, stop, don't pass it on, check the sources before you start saying, oh, wow, look at this. Even, again, one of the persons said, even if you agree with it, because you may be passing on false information, misguided, cyber propaganda. So that's one piece of advice. Provokes your emotion, stop, wait, what is it? Let's do a deeper look into whatever this may be. If you are very interested in a topic, do more in-depth analysis of the source. You've heard that. Find the source before you pass on. Don't verify before you like. Verify before you pass it forward. And again, the artificial intelligence has been created specifically to capture your emotions, keep you on for the advertisements that they're going to follow. That's the design, the purposeful design of all of these things that you get on these platforms that are created for that. So that's one bit of advice that I can share right now.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yes.
Like what actually does this communication hurricanes, like what advice you would give to something else?
Yeah, sure. Work in advance of the potential problem of the hurricane, disease, or whatever else, and establish trust with the target audience. Too many of the journalists, too many of the government officials parachute into the activities of informing, and they don't have the trust. Meanwhile, the social media people that you've been following, you have a sense of affinity with them for whatever cause, and they post something, you believe them, even though it's not necessarily true. So these official sources that know actually the best health practice, the best risk avoidance practice, have to develop those connections with their audiences way in advance on a regular basis. If you go into health communication, find your target audiences, and establish those connections. Even for us to get the data from the journalists and the media people and the government people that finally responded, it wasn't from me from Austin parachuting and calling Florida, hey, you have a newspaper that deals with Spanish populations, would you respond to the survey? It only has 12 questions. No way. But Miresa would call Pepe, mira, Federico y Sandra y yo, we're doing a study, and could you please respond to our survey? Oh yeah, ¿cuándo? Mañana, okay. Mira, Pepe, no ha contestado. Okay, I'll do it. It's that dynamic of personal connection that makes a huge difference in not only for this type of research, but other things as well. Yes.
Adding to what you were saying, that established trust in the media. I don't know if anyone here knows about Monzon, the famous Puerto Rican.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, everyone since Maria, everyone trusted Monzon. The government came in and stepped in and said anything. No one cared about the government. It was what Ada said, and what Ada said, it was since the climate is constantly changing, and we don't know if a hurricane is gonna change route. She was always on top of everything. And everyone automatically went to Ada Monzon because her language was very colloquial, and she explained everything, like we say, en arroyo habichuela.
Yes.
Because that way, everyone understood what was going on.
She was one of our great informants, and she did reply, thanks to Miresa's insistence. and precisely, we learned about her valuable contribution in this process, because she has established that trust. And there should be more like her in the media.
That's why people trust the media more than the government. And even though the media is fake.
Well, some fake news, yeah, some bad ones, especially if they're related to politics. because there's a certain group of people who have millions of dollars to create certain type of content. And one of them is the owner of X, formerly Twitter. And that person, quick, how much does he make per day? How much does he have access to with all of his capital per day? Give me a number, please, someone. Speak out quickly.
10 million.
How much?
10 million.
10, keep going.
You can't count.
No, keep, well, yeah, there is a figure that I learned about, and I calculated, and then it was verified in somewhere else that I read. Keep going. Keep going. $359 million a day. What does he do with that? Well, he stopped the satellite that he owns from telling Ukrainians, you heard about that? From helping the Ukrainians plan an attack on the Russians because Mr. Putin told them, stop that. So he stopped you. So, and in the US, you understand his politics and you can understand the AI and all of the other things that he's doing that are not necessarily for the benefit of the larger public. And if you think about how that's going on in Spanish, which very few people are doing research about, it's another story, and it's not a pretty one.
Federico, muchas gracias por the presentation. I was wondering your take on the changing media landscape in relation, for example, to podcasts. Because, for example, when I first arrived in the US 10 years ago, I would read El Nuevo Día and Vocero and Primera Hora religiously every morning. But now I just listen to Sandra Rodriguez's podcast in the morning, where she does like a digest of everything that's happened. And so I feel that there's more journalists like Bonita Radio using Facebook Live, using other sort of social media tools to get to different audiences. So is that changing the landscape?
Yes, it is. And I appreciate your question because I didn't mention that at all in this process, because that status quo that I talked about at the beginning, that's from the traditional commercial media. Because they're dependent, and even more so after the hurricane. Because corporations had less capital. They make a lot, but less. So they stopped advertising. But the government kept advertising, which makes these traditional media dependent on government. And whatever the government in power wants them to not say, it's not as much as what they say, as much as what they don't say. That then we do hear from people like Sandra Rodriguez Cotto with her. I don't listen to her podcast, but I read her morning morning summary of the news. And then Jaime Torres with independent media, Bonita Radio, all of these. For my hope is that they are reaching to broader populations to undermine the colonial effect, the status quo effect of the traditional media. But here, to answer that, we have to do a clear assessment of who are the audiences for these. Because for El Nuevo Día and Telemundo and WKQ and all of these, you still have a large middle class Puerto Rican population that they'll be upset as hell about all the things that are going on, that they don't have electricity, that they don't have that. But when it comes to voting, it's the popular centrist party is not working, it hasn't worked, hasn't done much. The pro-independence mean communism, so let's vote for the status quo. Partido Nuevo Progresista. End of story. And the pro-independence folks, fractured for many years, haven't had a cohesive message of an alternative that is doable in the minds of not you and me, but in the minds of that first group that I mentioned that is still longing on to the status quo media. That's my challenge, as I've conversed with many people about that for years. You can't continue preaching to the choir. You have to go to the non-convinced, the non-folks, the folks who do not follow you, and what is the message that you have to create to get them to understand the contradictions of the corruption of the system, and there's an alternative to the status quo. But I'm not there to do that, I just talk about it.
We have time for another couple.
One last question, comment, anything? Don't want to go for your next class. Folks, I really appreciate your presence here because it makes my visit to Wisconsin so much more meaningful. Again, I was like many of you just a few decades ago, but it's still in my heart, the going up and down Bascom Hill, the pink flamingos. By the way, the first Statue of Liberty on the lake was one of the years that I was here. So I remember coming back from Puerto Rico from our winter vacation and then going to the lake and saying, they did it. My God, they did it when we saw that statue. So it's great to be here. I wish you the best. And if I could be of service for any one of you, your studies or research, you know how to reach me. Thank you very much.